Also, it's nice to read every time at the end of the service.
We need to hand out the Mishnah packet there. Yeah. And you've already got your copy, but we need to make sure everyone else gets a copy. Yeah. All right, so we are in chapter 8, and we are in Mishnah 5. And if you remember, we were talking about the person who borrowed and they were using things, and something happened to them. Was it borrowed? Was it rented? Those were all of the issues we were handling from last week. Got a vague memory, right? Yeah. Okay, I know it's hard. It's hard when you go a whole week. So I always recommend. By the way, if you want to take home the packets, you're welcome to take it home. You can review what we've studied. It helps it sink in.
By the way, right, before you start, do you have already in mind which one will be the next one?
I know we're getting close to. I don't. So we'll have to talk about that. Okay. Once we finish Bava Metzia, where are we going to go next?
Yeah.
So, but right now we're on 8.5. Good. Good. Can I call on you?
Is that starting with the first page?
No. Turn to hit Mishnah 5. It'll say Mishnah 3.
Mishnah 3.
One more, Mishnah 5. There we are.
Okay. First point, if one sold his olive trees as firewood, and they bore fruit that gave less than a quarter log of oil per seah, this belongs to the new owner of the olive tree.
Right, so this is somewhat derivative from what we were talking about before about the babies. If you have a baby born to the cow and all of that, except here, I'm selling you all the firewood in my field, right? You're going to go and you're going to cut down the trees and you get all the firewood. But you go out there and there are still some olives on the trees, right? And back then they didn't eat olives as much as they made oil from them. That was the main thing to do. And so they picked the few olives that are left in the firewood trees. They weren't fruit trees, but firewood trees. They pick the olives, they squeeze it out. If there is less than a quarter log per seah, that is to say, if they're not really big, juicy olives, you're not getting a lot of oil out of every olive, right? The amount of oil you get is like that for a giant amount of olives. Keep it, right? Just keep it. Basically, they're as dry as the wood, and you can keep that extra oil for them. But
if they bore fruit that gave a quarter log of oil or more per seah, the one said, "It was my trees that produced it," and the other said, "It was my land that produced it." Let them share the produce.
Right. So if you get a lot of oil, the guy's like, whoa. I sold you the trees, right? I didn't sell you the fruit. And the guy says, yeah, but it's my trees that I'm getting for firewood that makes the fruit. And the guy says, yeah, but it's my land that makes the tree. So who does the fruit really belong to? Because now it's worth something, right? Now it's not just drippings. You share, right? You just share the value. So makes sense, right? Okay.
Second point, if a flood washed away a man's olive trees and set them in the midst of his fellow's field where they bore fruit, and the one said it was my trees that produced it, and the other said it was my land that produced it, let them share the produce.
All right. So
I didn't voluntarily give you those trees. They washed away.
Exactly.
You didn't pay me for them.
And I don't have any claim on them precisely. I can't like uproot them and get them back. Yeah. They're stuck in your land now. But the fruit did come from my land, right? Because the olive trees, the olives were made because of growing with me, even though they're on your property now.
So what does mean a river wash away the olive tree? Meaning that took all the tree to a different field.
Yeah.
So will not be in the land.
Here's my tree. It was in this field.
Yeah.
The river comes. It moves the tree to my neighbor's field.
Okay.
Right? Yeah. That's exactly what it means.
But the tree is not more like standing.
No, it is. No, the idea is that it gets there and they probably stick it back up and it grows a little bit more.
Or not. Maybe
or not. I mean, either way is fine. I mean, the commentary.
Because when I say that if it's not standing, it's not the land of the other person.
No, but
The
it's
other
the land.
person.
Yes, it is the land because it came from
No,
his
but
land.
but it's not the land that make the tree grow. The new land.
No, not the new, the old.
So well, but they divide because they say, well, it's a new tree. It's my tree.
Because
But
it's on my land.
But it's my tree now,
It's my tree. It washed onto my land, makes it mine.
right? It was.
It still makes sense to share. Yeah.
It still makes sense to
It's
share.
nice, but I'm out of all those trees now. I used
Oh.
those trees, now I got nothing.
Yeah.
I didn't even sell them to you. You didn't pay me for them, and you get half my oil too.
Yeah, well, because I didn't take them either. I didn't come into your house and steal your trees,
That's true.
right? It wasn't me, it was the river. So the trees technically belong to me now.
Give me half the oil, which
Exactly.
is nice of you. Thank you.
Well, which is
Yeah.
which is
I
fair,
can see how you
Right.
go back, yes.
because in a sense they both are partners in making the oil.
Yeah.
Even though in this very strange way of it coming across.
Unwilling partners, but
Yeah.
nevertheless partners.
Unwilling, yes. Well, I mean, the second guy's probably a little happy because, he didn't expect to get anything, and all of a sudden trees are on his property. A windfall, exactly right. So, 50% is better than nothing, and both of them agree. Because one of them could have had nothing if all the trees had just gone out to the ocean,
That's right.
and the other one could have had nothing if the trees hadn't come to his property. So each of them starts off with more than they could have expected to get.
And I can see the logic in it because there's no way to prove that this really the tree that was on his lot. How do you know?
Right.
You put a name on it or
Right, or which olive grew before it came to my property,
yeah.
right? I mean, is this olive a new olive or is this olive a your olive? And it's just doesn't work like that. I mean, that's one of the reasons, just as an aside, and because we're in the right week, that's why we have Tu B'Shvat, right? We don't actually worry about each blossom on the tree for which part of the year is it going to be tithed from. Is the tree blossoming? It's already from the past. Is the tree not blossoming? Tu B'Shvat comes. Okay, now it's from the new year. It's just easier to make a sharp line rather than checking every piece of fruit. Make sense? Okay. The Mishnah is nothing if not reasonable. Most of the time. Okay, Mishnah 6.
If one leased a house to his fellow in the rainy season, he cannot make him leave it during the time between Sukkot to Pesach.
All right, so we'll pause there. We're basically going to get renters' rights in this part. And we're going to talk about renter and sharecropper rights even more in the next chapter. But just renting a house, right? So I go to you and I rent my house from you, and I'm renting it during the rainy season, which during the rainy season in Israel is Sukkot to Pesach. If I rent it during that time, you can't kick me out. Now, that doesn't mean if I don't pay, you can't kick me out. That means if I'm paying you and we agreed to rent it, you can't just say, you know what, I'm going to give it to someone else tomorrow. Not during the rainy season. Because it's rainy and it's cold and it's hard to find a place to live, right? So you can't kick me out during the rainy season. But
I thought because it's the season that you prepare the land for growing and for farming.
but this is for a house, right? So for the fields, we're going to get more of that in the next chapter. But this is just for a house, as we're going to see when it talks about in a city, where it's not about the field preparation. But in summer,
But if it's in the summer, he must give him 30 days notice.
right, which is fair, right? If I want to stop renting the house, or I want to rent it to someone else, or I'm going to remodel, I can ask you to leave because it's my house. I'm renting it to you. But I do have to give you time to find somewhere else to live. I can't just say, all right, out. I have to give you at least a month's notice so you can find other arrangements. However,
In large cities, whether it is during the rainy season or the summer, he must give 12 months notice.
all right, so this is the extreme that represents the real estate market of the ancient world. So do we have any real estate agents here?
Yeah, and you too. Come on, advertising.
yeah.
Okay.
So I think we have a very good real estate agent in here. And as the old saying goes, location, 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 right? A city was a great place to live. And a city was a limited place to live. I mean, nowadays we say like Orlando, like it's a city. this isn't a city in the traditional sense that they knew, right? Their city was a wall, right? And that was a real city, right? Everything else was a village. If you get a house inside the wall, that's pretty good. That's great. But guess
Think what's happening in the old town in Jerusalem.
But think what happens exactly when the population starts going up, right? The wall, it's not made out of rubber. Right? The wall is the wall.
And they couldn't do like we do, build up skyscrapers.
Well, they did, but not
there's a-
skyscrapers.
Right, there's a limit to how many people can fit and how many houses you can fit in that area. It's
Exactly,
limited.
which means that if I've got this nice house that I'm renting in the city, inside the walls, and you want me to leave, okay, it is your property, it is your right to ask me to leave. But you got to give me like a year to find somewhere else in the city that I can live. I still have to leave, and I'll go live in a village or something. But you have to at least give me an opportunity, because my whole life is built around having this house inside of a city. And other houses are hard to find because of the population pressure inside the wall. So a little different than our modern system, but I suppose, like you might look at like the rent-controlled apartments in Manhattan and such as being similar cases where there are certain prize opportunities that you can't just take away from someone without giving them a lot of advance notice now. Again, eventually, it is the owner's property. And if the guy after a year has nowhere else, sorry. I should still be, show Rahmanas, I should still be kind and try and find some way for us to work this out or help you. But at the end, it is still my property, and I do have the right to ask you to leave with warning. For businessmen, yes.
If one leased a shop to his fellow, whether in large cities or small towns, he must give 12 months notice.
All right, so why would shops be given a bigger warning time than a house?
When you rent a shop, you invest in that. You set up the counters the way you want, you fix it, you bring in goods.
Right.
You spent a lot to get that shop so customers will come in.
Exactly. It's your parnassa, right? This is for the Yiddish, exactly. It's a parnassa, right? This is how you make your livelihood. And you've invested your time, your energy, you have customers that are coming to you now. This is where your tools are.
Yes.
If I need to move my shop, that's not just as easy as moving my bed. And so they need at least 12 months for moving your shop.
But all shops aren't that easy to move, I realize, because Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, if it is a shop occupied by bakers or dyers, he must give 3 years notice.
Right.
They need more equipment, right?
Well, bakers, because of the ovens and such, that's very important. A different problem.
Yeah.
The smell. Who's going to let you live near them? Right? Who wants that shop in their neighborhood? It's NIMBY, not in my backyard. Dyers and tanners, nobody wanted them anywhere nearby because the chemicals that were used for the dyeing were not pleasant. And so there was somewhat of an equipment issue, but also it was hard to find a good location to be a dyer. And so if I say, oh, sorry, I'm going to have to, move the shop, or, I'm going to have to ask you to leave, this is going to be hard for you to find a replacement. And if you don't find a replacement, you could starve. Remember, this is long before we had good, solid systems to keep people from starving to death. So I need to give you at least 3 years that you can do your job.
What that would mean is I would never rent a shop to a dyer.
Well, and that's one reason why it's hard
To find
another place to move your shop.
Right.
Right? If everybody knows that you have to give a 3-year warning.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if you have a dyer who's renting from you,
And he's paying your rent.
he's happy and wants to work with you.
Stay there. Right.
Because he's found some place that he can work. Yes, it puts a limit on your flexibility, but it's a good, solid customer to be your renter.
What happens if in all these notice, like 12 months, 3 years, you say, you know what, in 12 years you need to leave, when 3 years, and in the middle you change your mind. What happened?
Well, if it's the owner who changes his mind,
Yeah, the owner.
wants to stay, the renter can stay. And if the owner comes back the next day and says, no, I want you to go, the clock starts again. Right? So if they want to make a new lease and say you can stay. You don't have to find a new place. Once they make the new lease, they're back on the clock. But the owner can always change his mind to extend your time. But the hard part is for the poor guy of trying to find a place to live or do his work. Okay? All right, so again, showing over and over again that in Judaism, the owner of property absolutely has enormous rights with which to use their property, but they do also have to take into consideration the needs of the people that they are renting to, or in other parts of the Mishnah and Talmud, they talk about, the pollution from your work and the noise for your neighbors. And so you have the right to use your property, but there are limits because of how it affects other people. Make sense?
Yeah.
All right. So now we are on Mishnah 7.
If one rented a house to his fellow, he is obligated to provide it with a door, a bolt, a lock, and anything that is the work of a craftsman.
Right? So basically what this is saying is, if I'm renting you a house, it has to be a house, not a box. It's like the old joke of, oh, you wanted a door with the apartment? Oh, the door's an extra $50 a month. Like,
What's the bolt?
the lock. Right. For like on fences, we use them still today. But back then, they didn't have fancy locks. So yeah, if you're going to rent somebody a house, you have to actually have the things that are part of the house that are made by a craftsman. You've got to provide those. That's what it means to rent a house. It's a minimum standard of livability, you might say. On the other hand, anything that people normally make themselves, and this is back in the day when people would make all sorts of things for themselves, mats and pots and such. You don't have to provide him with those. He can make that for himself. Make sense? Fair? Balanced?
Yeah. It's like not that different from what we do today.
I don't know what the standard is because I've never rented I've rented apartments on campuses, but I've never rented an apartment except in Japan, which had its own interesting systems. So I don't know what the modern, if you were going to rent somebody a house, does the house have to have electricity?
Yes.
Yeah.
Heat, electricity, yes.
Yeah.
Right. I know you can't turn it off if you're angry at the person, but I'm just wondering, are you allowed to rent somebody a shack? I've got a shack in my backyard. No plumbing, no electricity, no heat,
No, you can't.
but $50 a month, you can live there.
No.
I thought not, and that's kind of what is going on here. Is the renter has to have the renter has to have a minimum standard of livability for his property.
Yeah, they expect them to approve the building.
Right, you need a certificate of occupancy and the inspector will approve.
Certificate of occupancy, that's the phrase, right?
And also the city, permission from the city.
Right, and permit from the city, right? So this isn't quite that complicated, but then houses back then were simpler. There was no electricity, there was no plumbing, that just didn't exist.
A door, a bolt, and a lock makes perfect sense.
Exactly right. Otherwise, it's just a box, a brick box or a wood box, and so this is making it into a house. And nowadays, we would probably, say, if you're going to rent something, it has to have,
Right.
it's not going to make you go outside in the bushes. So similar ideas, it's just a little more complicated now.
And now we have something that has nothing to do with today.
Oh, we got plenty of manure still around.
The manure, we don't rules about it. The manure which collects in the courtyard belongs to the owner of the house, and the tenant can only claim the refuse from the oven and the stove.
All right. So you rent someone a house, and the droppings of the animals are around. The owner can collect those as being the property of the property, right? That's just what has come onto his property. His area claims it on his behalf, right? It's his dirt, it's his land. So when the horse drops it, he owns it.
Is this a plus for the owner or a
Oh,
minus?
plus.
Plus, he's going to use it like for
Fertilizer.
Farming, for
Yeah.
farming.
Yeah.
fertilizer. It's not
Absolutely.
because the tenant is
Yeah,
responsible for
shake
cleaning
up.
up the place.
No.
This is
This is
Okay.
it's brown gold.
Brown gold. Okay. farming.
Well, that was all they had.
There you go.
Right, I
That's
mean-
what organic farming is.
Right. I mean, if you don't have chemical systems to fertilize,
Right. This is what you do.
this is what you do.
So this is valuable stuff.
That's
Okay.
right. Similarly, the refuse from the oven and the stove, the ash, was also used for fertilizing and other handicrafts. You didn't just throw out your old ash; it was useful for other craft. So, but that, because it was made by the tenant using it, still belongs to the tenant, right? So I'm renting the house, and I cook my bread, and I'm putting my wood in the stove to cook my bread. When it's done, I get the ash and I get my bread, because I made that by my cooking. Now, what my donkey drops in the courtyard, all right, fine, that belongs to the owner of the house because my donkey chose to drop it there. But in the oven, that's mine. I made that. It seemed like a reasonable balance. Good. Remember how reasonable it seems. We're going to get into more of it when we get into chapter 9, because a large portion of sections of the Talmud deal with arguments between the owner and the tenant, or the owner and a sharecropper, because each side believes the other side is cheating them. I know. I can't imagine why people would ever assume the landlord was cheating them, or why the landlord would ever assume that the renter was cheating him. I can't imagine how that would ever happen. People were so primitive back then. All right, Mishnah 8.
If one rented a house to his fellow by the year, and the year was made a leap year, the extra month goes to the tenant.
All right, so how do you make a leap year?
You got to count and see how the months are going, and because you really have to have the harvest time and Pesach in the springtime, and if it's already moved to winter, you got to add months.
Exactly. So nowadays, our calendar was calculated almost 2,000 years ago, and we just look on the piece of paper and we know whether it's a leap year 10 years in advance, right? Like, when I'm planning the bar mitzvah for someone, I can tell whether it's a leap year anytime in the future.
And the way our calendar is now, the solar calendar, we only have a leap day.
Oh, well, I'm talking the Jewish leap year, right?
But the Jewish leap year, that's, yes.
But in the old days, that is to say, during the days of the temple and right after the temple, you waited until around now, and you were like, wow, spring's taken a long time to get here. I think we're going to need an extra month before Passover, or else Passover is going to be before the spring equinox. And so they would add in an extra month based on their calculations of how much longer do we have to the equinox, and then how much longer would Passover be after that. They would add in the month on the fly. So in a year, you didn't know whether it was going to be a leap year or not until around this time of year. So,
But the Kohen was doing it, isn't it?
Well, it was done through the Sanhedrin, and the people would come as witnesses to say what month they had seen. So every month was established by the court, and then it would be proclaimed.
So this is Psachim.
Exactly. And then it would be proclaimed by the court that this was a leap year. Well, imagine you're a tenant, right? And you say, I want to rent the house for the year. And then along comes the court, and the court says, there's an extra month this year. Wait, do I have to pay another month? Or does the landlord not get the rent for 1 month? Because I already paid for the year. If I'm paying by the month, it's no issue. Here, does the year include the possible leap year? Or does the year not include the possible leap year? And the Mishnah says it includes it. Lucky you, Mr. Tenant, you've just won a free month.
All right.
Exactly right. So the
Is there
tenant.
a but coming?
What?
Is there a but coming? But.
Well, there's a but the but was already mentioned, but
Yes.
which I sort of said in passing, but now it's explicit.
Right. If he rented it by the month, and then the year was made a leap year, the extra month goes to the owner.
Right. So if I'm paying you $500 a month, and we only have an agreement for a month, and so each month it's 500,
that
500,
makes sense.
not 6,000 at once, but 500 each month. When the leap month comes, there's another 500, right? Because I'm just paying by the month. All right.
It once happened in Tzipori that a person leased a bathhouse from his fellow at 12 golden dinarim a year, 1 dinar per month. 12 months. And when the year became a leap year, the case came before Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel and Rabbi Yossi, and they said, let them share the extra month.
So here's the problem, right? We agreed that I was going to rent it, and we agreed I was going to pay you 12 dinari, right? 12 gold coins
Oh, yeah.
for the year.
But we said.
But I said explicitly one a month.
We can't
It's
do
a
one.
stupid contract,
Yeah.
right? So this is the issue. They basically made a stupid contract because they should have said 12 denarii for the year or 1 denarii per month, period. But instead they said 12 for the year, 1 each month, which I suppose they were trying to say the total will be 12, but I'm only paying you once a month, so the total will be 12. But in any case, because of the way they worded it, it was neither by the year nor by the month. And so the solution?
Sure.
Compromise. Compromise. And again, as we mentioned before, we discussed before, the rabbis really preferred that people just compromised if they could. In this particular case, the compromise was law, but in other cases, said this person or that person, if they could find a way to compromise and have peace before coming to the Beit Din, that was always better. But as we all know, it doesn't always happen.
No.
So that's why we still have to study the law rather than just be nice. Mishnah 9.
Mishnah 9 is, if one rented a house to his fellow and it fell down, the owner must build him a new house.
Okay. Wait a minute. Hold on.
And what happened in the meantime?
How long do you think it takes to build a house?
A month?
Mr. Modern Man.
Yeah, right.
It takes a day, maybe 2.
It's a shack.
Yeah, I mean, how big do you think this house is? It's not a palace.
And you don't need to go for government approvals and permits. And
Well, why do you think it's falling down?
that's right.
Right, we don't have to. Who's building the house that it fell over?
That's
but
right. They didn't have tornadoes and typhoons.
No,
yet.
no, but they had earthquakes.
No, but they use stones and everything.
Stone or wood.
Oh,
Wood, I don't know how much wood in Israel, but stones and other things.
And they would use plaster. So you just stack up the stones, you plaster over it. Your house would be smaller than this room.
Yes, that's
Right?
right.
What do you need your house for? Right, nowadays we need our house for all our stuff,
Yes.
for sleeping, exactly. But you need a room. Do you need a room only to sleep in?
No.
What a weird idea that we have in America of a bedroom.
That's right.
I don't need a room only. I need a room just to lay down for 8 hours, and then the other 16 hours of the day, it's nothing. Sugar now. We have to build this, and we have to heat it, and it takes up all this extra space that I could be using for my craft and making a living.
That way, that makes a lot of sense. Like, why do you need?
Yeah.
Exactly right. Well, I mean, again, having lived in Japan for 3 years, they don't have bedrooms.
No.
Right? Your bedroom is your living room, and you at night you put out your futon, and then in the morning you fold it up and you put it in the closet. Why would I leave a bed sitting there all day?
They sleep in the floor.
Well, yeah. I mean, the floor is what's called tatami. It's a mat that's made out of like bamboo. So it's a little soft, and then you put your futon mat on top of it. It's perfectly fine. It's quite comfortable.
And gives you good back support, actually.
As long as you don't sleep on your side.
Oh, yeah, that could be
Sleep on your side is not so good, but if you sleep on your back, you're fine. So why waste a whole room?
Sure.
Right? And most of our rooms in our modern houses are filled with our stuff. Right? And even our kitchen. Our kitchens are so big now because we have pots and pans and plates and all this extra stuff. You got maybe 2 pots, 3 pots if you're in the ancient world and you're not very poor. Each person has a plate, maybe 2 plates. That's it.
And you don't have one whole room just to eat in?
No.
Oh my goodness.
No, you eat in the same place you sit, and you sit in the same place you sleep. And most of the time you'd be outside anyway, because who wants to sit in your house where there's not enough light, right? Because you don't have a bunch of windows, because the more windows you have, the more your heat escapes. So, and you cook mostly outside rather than inside, especially in Israel. I mean, yes, if you live in Europe and Scotland or Germany, it gets too cold to cook outside so much of the year. You have to cook inside. But in Israel, a lot of the ovens, they were outside.
So one hand is very fast to clean, another hand you need to clean constantly.
Right. Well, because you're always using the same space.
Yeah.
But on the lucky side, you don't have any stuff, no material goods, no consumer goods, no TV, no Walkman, no books. It's just a bare room with a couple chairs and some plates, maybe a table, and that's it. It's a simple, poor, and mostly miserable life, in terms of sickness and hunger and all the other issues. But it was simple. And that meant if your house fell down, building it up again wasn't so bad. I mean, after all, when it fell down, all the pieces were right there. It's like Legos, right? You just stack the blocks back up and build it. But who has to build it? The guy who's renting or the guy who owns it? The guy who owns it. right? Because it's his house. I'm only renting it. So that's the main question that's being answered here. And in the same way, we have some details of when you rebuild it.
So when you rebuild it, if the house was small, he may not make it larger. And if it was large, he may not make it smaller.
Now, before you ask, but what about, okay, right now, this is the owner making decisions only by himself, right? So the owner says, all right, I rented this house to Mr. Smith. It fell down. Well, you know, as long as it fell down, I always wanted that house to be a little smaller. No.
But what happened if he wants a little larger?
I mean,
Because he's generous. And you know what? Maybe if I need to rebuild, I will do an investment for the future. I will do now a little larger. I will keep it the same rate for you. However, next year I will charge more because the house is already in a new contract, it's bigger.
so here's the surprise ending. I was trying to save the surprise. Not without the permission of the renter, right? Because the renter may say, look, I just want a small house, right? It's too much trouble to clean the big house, or it's takes too much fuel to warm the big house. I don't have enough, wood for the fire to keep the house warm.
But what happens if it's in the city and he gives them the 12 month in advance notice? I say, you know what, I want to build a bigger house, okay? Because in 12 months you are out and I want to rent to someone else that doesn't make me up and charge more.
But for 12 months I have to live here.
So still can block.
Still can block. Well, let's finish the list and then we'll see all the things that they can block.
If it was one house, he may not make it two. But if it was two houses,
No,
he may
there
not
was no but.
Oh, there's no but, that's right. If it was two houses, he may not make it one.
Right. So I know it's hard for us to imagine. Why would you but it could have been 2 rooms and he wants to just build the wall back up with no
Yes.
door.
You have double rent.
I mean, they'd be smaller,
That's a good business.
but not without the permission of the person who currently lives there. Also,
He may not reduce or increase the number of windows unless it is with both of their consent.
and this comes back to the idea that, look, I rented this of you. We have a contract. We have an agreement. Now, if it's the 30-day notice, then we might be able to work something out that for the next 30 days we'll compromise, and then I'm going to do what I want. But as long as our contract is a contract, I'm obligated to give you what I promised. Right? If I promise to give you a donkey, I have to give you a donkey. If I promise to give you a house with 2 windows and 200 square feet, I'm going to give you a house with 2 windows and 200 square feet. And if that house breaks, I have to give you a house with 200 square feet and 2 windows. I have to give you the same thing that I promised. Or we can agree that you don't mind, like let's say the year case that you talked about. I'm going to rebuild the house and I really want to build it much larger, much fancier. It's going to be wonderful. You can stay in it for the year at the old price.
Or I will do something different. If the person they want to block me and say, you know what, I pay you 1 free month, or I pay you a certain amount of money in exchange to your flexibility.
Exactly right. You can make any kind of arrangement, right?
If the two of you agree,
exactly.
you can make anything.
I'll give you a free month's rent
Right.
if you agree that I can rebuild it the way I want.
But these rules are for when the 2 people can't agree.
Exactly right.
This is what's going to be the result. If you take this to court, this is what's going to happen.
Exactly right. But if they agree, and it's important for the renter to know that he has these rights, because if the renter didn't know that he had these rights, then the owner could just simply say, oh, I'm going to take this house and I'm going to make 10 houses here now, and you're going to live standing up, and it's the same price. And what? For the renter to be able to compromise and give consent, he also has to know what his power is in the relationship. And so that's why the rules give him that authority. It's okay. It's the end of the day, and you're still studying, so you're doing all right.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So I wake up at 5 in the morning.
Oh, okay.
Chapter 9. Okay, so as I said, one of the first days of Mishnah class in rabbinic school, my teacher brought in a copy of an old Mishnah that was from Europe, and on the inside was stamped or written rather, and I don't remember the Yiddish, I'm sorry, Harriet, but it was the Woodcutters Society of the town, of some small town. Exactly. And he said this was what the people would do. No one could afford a copy of the Mishnah for themselves because they weren't rich, but they wanted to learn. And so the woodcutters, after the day's cutting wood, they'd get together and they would share the book and they'd study together. And they all invested in the book so that they could learn together. So our people have studied while tired for a long time. It's what we do. And yeah, it's not as good as if we could just have the whole day sitting and studying in Beit Midrash. That would be lovely, but we have work to do, and that's why it's so, I think, wonderful that the Mishnah talks about working people all the time.
I think that also is good. I hope that's a good lesson to my daughter because they know where you're going. Oh, I'm going to study Mishnah, and they saw that I'm exhausted. My eyes are red. I say, well, really, God, I say, you know what? I'm looking forward the whole week for that moment.
Yeah.
Okay, that's my moment. And no matter what's happened, I will go. So it's important.
It makes a huge impression on kids, and it's an incredible lesson to them that Judaism takes effort, and learning takes time and effort. And Judaism wants us to learn, so we have to invest if it's important to us. It's not something that just happens automatically, and it's not something that stops when you're no longer a kid.
Or after bar mitzvah, that.
Exactly right. It's very important that is not the message.
Yes.
All right, chapter 9. If you thought it was difficult with renter and tenant, or the owner and tenant, now we have sharecroppers. So first of all, we have to make sure we understand what a sharecropper is. All right, so this is somebody who has agreed to be the worker for your field, and in exchange, they have to give you something from what they grow. Now, how much they give you, whether they give you a percentage or whether they just give you an amount, that is part of the contract. And we're going to see there are a lot of different rules on that. But that's the basic idea. They don't own the land. You do. But you don't work the land. They do. And you share the bounty somehow. But you can imagine, what part do I have to give him? What part does he give me?
The story of Ruth.
The story of, Ruth wasn't a sharecropper.
The other people around here.
Some of them, right? Many of them were just the other poor who were coming to Boaz because he was so kind. But sharecroppers, this was a standard practice because many people would have to sell their land because of poverty, a bad harvest or something. And what are they going to do, right? They're a farmer. It's not like they can just go get a job in a factory. So they would go ahead and say, I'll tell you what, I'll sell you my land, but let me keep working it, and I'll give you X from that. Make sense? All right. So it wasn't fun, but it worked. Now, sometimes, by the way, sharecropping could also be lucrative, right? Because it wasn't always the poor person who was sharecropping. I know we have that image from America, and that was certainly common at that time. But sharecroppers could also be people who were just really good farmers. And they did a really good job farming. And so they'd say, look, you're not doing so well with this land. Let me grow it for you. And I will give you X amount. And you don't have to work in the field. Right? You can go be a blacksmith or be a potter or whatever you want to do. And I'll do the work in the field. Right? Or me and my group will do the work. So sharecropping could be like an entrepreneur. They could do this as a good way of making business. If you're a good farmer, that's good. So that's what we have in mind. But so don't only think of it as being rich landowner and poor sharecropper. They're meant to be equal, certainly in the eyes of God, but also even in the eyes of the law. Okay, Mishnah 1 from chapter 9.
If one leased a field from his fellow, and the custom of the place was to cut the crops, he must cut them.
Go ahead and read the next.
If the custom was to uproot them, he must uproot them. If the custom was to plow after reaping, he must plow. Everything should follow local custom.
Okay, so that's the most important last line. Everything should follow local custom. So if the local custom is that sharecroppers, all they have to do is they cut the fields with the scythe, right? With the knife, the sickle, and that's what they do when they leave. The little pieces left in the ground, that's the custom. If the custom is you have to pull everything out of the ground, right, all the roots out, then you have to pull all the roots out. And if the custom is you have to get everything out of the ground and plow the ground afterwards, that's what you have to do, right? That is, you follow the custom of whatever the local rules are of what sharecroppers do.
It's very consistent for the whole Mishnah
Yes.
that we learn.
Exactly right.
Always is follow the custom.
Right. The minhag hamakom, the custom of the place was so important because they wanted people to have a shared expectation. Right? So that when I come to Yerach and I say, Yerach, I want to be your sharecropper, and you say, great, that's fine. At the end of the year, I don't want him to be angry at me because I didn't do something that everyone else does. And I don't want to be angry at him because he's making me do something that no one else does. We want to all be able to know what's normal. And we do what's normal. Make sense? Makes sense. Of course it does.
Yes. Just as they share the grain, so too they share the chopped straw and the stubble.
Go ahead and finish it off.
Just as they share the wine, so too they share the dead branches and the reeds used to prop up the vines. And both parties must at the outset provide their share of the reeds.
Okay, so it's technical if you're a farmer, but the basic idea here is that you not only share the produce that comes out of the ground, you also share the extra stuff. Right, the extra branches that you prune off the vine, well, those are firewood or could be used for something else. So when I'm the sharecropper and I'm pruning off those branches, half the pile goes to me, half the pile goes to the owner of the land, or whatever percentage, right, we're doing. Whatever the agreement is, right, it has to be shared. And the same thing, even the reeds that we use to help support nowadays, the planting stakes that people use. Everybody has to provide their own share. Maybe he buys his, maybe I go down to the river and I get mine, but we both have to do our share for doing this. So you share in everything according to the agreement. Make sense? Makes sense. Okay. I think we got a little more time. Sure. Let's Mishnah 2.
If one leased a field from his fellow and it was an irrigated field or a field with trees, and the spring dried up or the trees were cut down, he may not give the owner less than his agreed rental.
All right, now that's a little confusing until you hear the second half. So let's go ahead and hear the second half.
But if he had said, lease me this irrigated field or this field with trees, and the spring dried up or the trees were cut down, he may give less than the prescribed rental.
All right, so if the deal was I'm renting the field, and the field happened to have trees in it, or the field happened to have a spring, so it was really easy for me to do the watering. And the tree I could eat because I rented the field. I could eat the fruit from the tree too. And the tree died or the spring went away. I rented the field. I didn't rent the spring. I didn't rent the tree. That wasn't part of the deal. I got to use them because they were there, but they were incidental. But in the agreement, if I say, rent me this irrigated field, well, that means when the spring goes dry, I'm not getting what I rented. And since not like a house, you can't just rebuild the spring, I have to, there'll be a discount for how much I have to pay you when the crops come in. What I bought from you, or what I rented from you, is now reduced in value.
So you have to watch what you say.
That is also very consistent throughout the Mishnah,
Yes.
right? Words matter, right? Because you have that shared expectation, that's great, but when we get down to the details, we both have to be clear what we mean and what we want and what we're paying and when it's happening and all of those things, because that way everybody knows what they're agreeing to and it will be fair, and hopefully at the end, everyone will be happy. Because the idea here, of course, is that everyone's going to come out of this happy, right? The sharecropper got to make money off of working your land because he didn't have his own, or maybe this is extra land that he can do. And you're happy because you got money from land that you probably weren't going to work yourself. Good. As long as people are treating each other right.
And there are no surprises that you didn't anticipate. They've anticipated so many things here, so you all know what's going to happen in the event of any kind of catastrophe.
Exactly right. Exactly right. All right, so let's do Mishnah 3, I think, and then we'll call it for tonight.
If one leased a field from his fellow and let it lie fallowed, they assess how much it was likely to have yielded, and he must pay the owner accordingly, since he wrote in the leasing agreement, if I suffer the land to lie fallow and do not till it, I will pay thee at the rate of its highest yield.
Okay. So fallow means you didn't use the land. So imagine I'm a sharecropper, one of those people, like I said, who maybe I'm doing 10 fields, and I'm sharecropping for all these different people. And one of them I say, you know what? The land, the soil, it's only, so. I'm just not going to bother with this one this year. Well, the guy who rented it to me, he was expecting a return on that land. So if I just say, I'm not going to do anything, you still have to pay me a percentage of what the expected yield was going to be. Right? So that way, because if you weren't going to do it, I could have hired someone else to do it. So this is a way of protecting the owner from a sharecropper who just is deciding not to do it. And they point out as well in the commentary that if the agreement had been, I'm going to give you 200 coins, and then you choose not to plow, you're still giving 200 coins. Right? So one way or another, you have to pay what you should have paid if you had actually used the land. Because otherwise, you shouldn't have agreed to take the land. Right? Don't say you'll work it if you're not going to work. Make sense?
Very logical.
Very logical. I know, we're just whipping through these. They make so much sense. All right, so we're going to continue with these ideas. We're going to get into more of the hired laborers' rights, right? People that you pay by the day, day laborers. But we're going to continue with the sharecropper, and then we'll get into those worker rights, and we'll have good fun in chapter 9. And we'll start talking about what we'll do after Bava Metzia. All right.
Okay.
Or you can take it home and review.